Good evening, it's meteorologist Michael Fecka. Welcome back to the 9 p.m. all-weather, all-streaming show that we do here every night during the workdays and on weekends. We stream it out to all of our streaming platforms as well as to Facebook Live and YouTube Live. So if you're joining us from either of those, please feel free to leave a question or a comment. Hopefully I'll be able to address anything as I go through the forecast, but if not, I'll go through at the very end and see if I can answer anything and interact with you guys individually after all of that. So let's get started here with a look at our headlines, and really that hasn't changed much over the last several days. Heat is really the headline here for the next several days. We are on alert through Wednesday for that extreme heat and humidity. For the last several days here and much of last week, we've been kind of included within a heat advisory. However, once we get into tomorrow afternoon, Tuesday and Wednesday, we'll actually transition over to an extreme heat warning. So that just means it's going to get even hotter than what we experienced just this past week. So making sure we're prepared for that. But the good news is it doesn't last very long. We do have relief in sight there. By the time we get into Thursday, it looks like we could have a cold front move through. That'll bring in some chances for showers and thunderstorms, but also bring in a much more tolerable air mass for the end of next week, or at least the end of the work week. But more importantly, again, going into the details of this heat wave, we are on alert through Wednesday. Heat index values of 110 or even higher are possible Monday and Tuesday, especially. Heat index values of 100 to 105 are still expected for Wednesday. However, because it's kind of butted up against those higher heat index values, they've just included Wednesday within that extreme heat warning. Now, talking about what we got to earlier today, we stayed dry here in the Evansville area, so we warmed all the way up into the lower 90s again, 92 degrees, 93 off to the south there in Bowling Green, around 89 in Paducah. A little bit cooler to our north. They had a couple of thunderstorms move through areas like Columbus, only warmed up to around 86, 87 up towards Fort Wayne. Now, our current temperatures, we've cooled down a good bit since then. We're at around 79 degrees for our current temperatures here in Evansville, 80 there in Henderson, and 81 in Madisonville and Owensboro, and of course into the 70s as you go north of I-64. Dew points, however, still quite elevated into the low to mid 70s, 72 degrees in Evansville and Newburgh, still 77 there in Henderson. So it is going to be muggy here even through the overnight hours. Our current feels like temperatures still also pretty warm. Feels like 82 here in Evansville. Not as bad as yesterday. We still felt like 90 degrees at this hour, but we've had some outflow boundaries from those storms to the north, so that has helped cool us off a good bit. You can kind of see where those storms developed just based on the color of this map here. Where it's cooler, you had that rain cool air. Where it's still hot, you didn't really see much of that action at all. So it was pretty spotty earlier, but some folks did see some relief from it. Looking at our Doppler radar right now, we are all dry across the tri-state. We could still see a pop-up shower or storm here over the next few hours, but now that the sun is set, we really don't have much of that heating of the day that's kind of required for these storms to initiate, but can't completely rule it out. However, most of us will stay dry with partly cloudy skies. Temperatures will drop down into the mid to upper 70s once again, and then tracking out our rain chances through the next several days. Outside of, again, another afternoon pop-up for Monday, we should stay dry Tuesday, and then some better chances for a few more scattered showers and storms arrive later in the day on Wednesday into Wednesday night, and then again into Thursday as that cold front slides on through. And then we'll have high pressure build in, it looks like, at least through Friday and Saturday of next week, and that completely kind of cancels out any rain chances that we would have for next weekend. So that is already good news. But tracking out the rest of our evening here, again, staying mostly dry through the overnight. Could see a few spotty showers early tomorrow morning, but during the heating of the day, that's where we'll have the best chance to see a couple of those spot downpours or even a thunderstorm develop, primarily south of the Ohio River, but it really could pop up anywhere. And then everything will kind of collapse as we head into tomorrow night with the loss of that daytime heating. But here are the two different kind of alerts that we have going on here. That heat advisory that is going to continue through tomorrow afternoon, and then we'll transition over to the extreme heat warning Monday through Wednesday. And you can see that purple color is where that extreme heat warning will be in effect. It does include most of the tri-state area except for the far northern fringes of our viewing area. area and the far eastern counties. But here's a look at those heat index forecasts. Now again, they are going to be a little bit more variable here depending on where you are. So generally up to 110 or greater is possible for Monday and Tuesday. It's going to be a slightly less oppressive for Wednesday, but still really elevated, 107 for those heat index values. But what is the real relief is looking at Thursday. I mean, Thursday will drop down into the 80s for our actual temperatures, and our dew points should be gradually crashing down from the upper 70s, at least into the lower 70s by Thursday. So that means our heat index values will be a lot cooler and below heat advisory criteria. However, we've got to get through the next 3 days first, and it's important to remember, please, if you have any daily strenuous activities outdoors, like you're a jogger or you go and you walk dogs or whatever you do, making sure you're doing that before 10 a.m. and generally after 7 p.m. You don't really want to be doing anything crazy outdoors during the heating of the day. And if you do have to be outside, lightweight, light-colored clothing will help reflect that sunlight away from you and keep you cooler. And of course, drinking plenty of water, even if you don't feel thirsty. And remember to wear your sunscreen, because getting burnt makes it harder to cool down and it increases your risk of heat-related illnesses. And we continue to remain on alert here for this heat and humidity, even though it's not fairly unusual here in the tri-state to get this hot in the middle of the summer, but it is really, really difficult on the body, especially several days of it that we've had. We've been hitting the 90s since last week. We'll continue to do so at least through Wednesday, and then with those heat index values into the triple digits, it does really take a toll on you, even if you don't realize it. And that's why heat is the #1 cause of weather-related deaths here in the United States. So it's something that a lot of folks endure and get through it, but if you don't take the necessary precautions, if you're not prepared for it, it can definitely result in some bad endings there. So making sure you're taking care of yourself and others who maybe not be able to take care of themselves either as well. So especially elderly folks and younger children, making sure you're checking in on them as well. Now, looking at our heat risk, it does expand, or it was expanded earlier today. We were all in that major heat risk category. Seeing that continue for Monday and Tuesday, it does lighten up a little bit by the time we get into Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday, we'll start to feel a lot better outside. So here's a look at our temperature trend for the next 7 days, and you'll see that we'll climb up into the mid to possibly even upper 90s by the beginning of the work week, with a few spotty showers possible, but then that cold front moves through as we transition over into Thursday. That will bring us better chances for scattered showers and storms, but it will also take down those temps into the mid to upper 80s, and then behind that, a much more refreshing, somewhat cooler air mass. I mean, again, it's not like it's a refreshing fall front. It's still going to be in the 80s, but it's going to feel so much better than what we have been dealing with the last week or so. So that is what that power of the cold front will do. And also check out our overnight lows. Finally, for the first time in a very long time that I'm looking at this temperature trend, are we actually dropping below our average low temperature? So down into the 60s. I may be crazy, but that sounds like I could maybe turn off the air for a few days and leave those windows open overnight. That would be a lot more refreshing just to get some good outside air in there. So possibly could do that by the time we get into next weekend, but we'll hold off and see. I don't want to make any too big promises just yet, but it does look like it's going to be a lot more refreshing and cooler by next weekend. And here's a look at our dew point trend. This is what really is going to make the difference for us, is we've been stuck in this stifling category here pretty much for the entirety of July. We'll finally drop out of the stifling category through the muggy and humid category and possibly all the way down into the pleasant category. That would mean our dew points were dropping into the lower 60s or even below that. So that would be a fairly dry air mass for this time of year, but it doesn't last very long. We start to shoot back up towards that humid and muggy category by the end of next weekend as we trend towards Sunday. So definitely keeping our eye on that. That is really what's going to be getting us through the work week here, is just the weather is going to feel so much better once the week is over. But here's a look at our high temperatures for the month of July that we've had so far. And you can see all but 5 of the days we've had this month, we've cracked 90 degrees, and we're on this long stretch here. Every single day last week, we topped out in the low 90s, and we continue to do that getting even hotter as we get into this work week. So in terms of precipitation, we were actually below average for a good bit there, and then we had some very heavy thunderstorms move through the Evansville area, so they were able to kind of pick up on that rainfall that we had last weekend here at the airport. So we picked up several inches just in a few days, and that really kind of bumped us back up out of that deficit for the month. However, we remain above average for the entire year. Now, looking at our longer range outlook, so the 8 to 14 day temperature outlook does show that the heat does build back in, at least to more average levels, maybe even slightly above in some spots, but generally not too bad as we go into the beginning of August for our temps. And then in terms of our precipitation, it looks like we'll end up right around average or maybe even slightly above farther off to our north and east. So nothing too crazy, at least for the beginning of August there, more typical for this time of year. But here's a look at your 7-day forecast just to kind of wrap everything up in a little bow here. We'll take that full screen, maybe we won't. But we'll look at our first alerts here through Wednesday. So again, 110 plus possible Monday and Tuesday. Still really hot on Wednesday, but maybe just not as bad as Monday and Tuesday. But the real relief arrives Thursday with that cold front. Temperatures drop down out of the 90s into the 80s and even into the mid 80s by the end of next weekend. So big things coming for us here. Going to check out the comment section. Good evening to you, Cheyenne, and also to you, Sergeant Williams. Jeanette says good evening as well. We just had a half-inch of rain in Whitesville, Kentucky, says Teresa. She got hit with one of those brief downpours. Ricky says good evening to you. And I'm liking the less and less alert days. Yes, you know, when we were here last week, or last weekend, those alert days covered up the entirety of the 7-day. Now that we're getting closer, the end is in sight. We've got 3 more days left of this tragic heat and humidity before it gets better for us. So we'll just have to hold out a little bit longer. Just remember to drink plenty of water, stay cool, and check up on one another. That is all I have for the forecast, so I'm going to hop off this live stream, and I'll send you guys over to 14 News at 10 for all the latest news and weather headlines. Until then, everybody, have a great rest of your night.